Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
No thanks, Kamala. You've done a terrible job.
We will continue to wage this fight.
You're ultra-liberal, and we don't want you here. We don't want you anywhere.
What's up, guys? What a week in American politics, man. What a week in geopolitics. Donald J. Trump just made it back to office. The 45th became the 47th. They tried to take him out. The man has come back so strong for Africa. What does this mean? What does it mean for blacks out there in the diaspora and certainly Africans on the continent? This is a man whose greatest policy revolves around immigration.
I am the chosen one.
Trade and business, certainly the economy of the state. And this thing is, the foreign policy has got to reflect America first.
It's going to be only America first.
And for Africans, we've got to ask ourselves, when is Africa first? When will Africans do the bidding for Africa? That is the biggest question. We've seen African presidents schmoozing with Joe Biden.
I'm looking forward to seeing many.
President Ruto, matter of fact, of Kenya is one of the latest examples. Invited to a state banquet, full guard of honor, always walking around with an ambassador who seems to be more of Kenya's foreign affairs minister. So it begs the question, what are the real interests? Will Donald Trump relate with Africa in the same fashion? Share your thoughts in the comments, man. But I beg to say that most likely the policies that Donald Trump has been pushing are going to come back fast. They're going to come back strong. So Africa, get ready. African presidents, Donald Trump is certainly telling you this is not free lunch. There is no time for free lunch here, man. And certainly for us as Africans, we are tired of our leaders going out there with the begging bowl. We are not a basket case, for crying out loud, man. We are a well-resourced continent. Within the soil, minerals, and certainly the young population of Africa is marching into the world resilient despite the adversities that we face, well-educated, and certainly very, very talented. That has been proven over and over again. Do we want our brothers to keep dying out in the seas, the Mediterranean, trying to get to Britain, trying to get to Spain, to France, Germany? We certainly don't need that. Africa certainly must take care of its children. We must get our act together. So what does President Donald Trump's new administration portend for Africa, for Kenya, and for the rest of the continent? That is the big question here. Remember, they tried to take him out, but the man has come back bigger and stronger. You don't have to like the man. I don't have to like him either. But he's won an election. He'll be the man in office. He will have to engage with the rest of the world. Certainly with China, with Russia. Is it good for peace? Is it good for trade? Is it good for immigration? That's what we need to confront. Check this out. This is Afrocentric. Let's get on with it, man.
Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy.
I'll be back. That was Donald Trump's message when he eventually had to leave office after the January 6th chaos at Capitol Hill, when they tried to storm and make a statement that, the past election was rigged. But the man has made it back. And this has been an election that obviously has divided America down the line. And for the very first time, I think there was a greater black population that moved out of the States to other countries, to Europe, to Africa. I know families that live out here in Africa, for example, in Nairobi, in Tanzania, all these places. Obviously, the turmoil in the US had left a bad taste in many, many mouths. And for the longest time, I think the black population generally, by far, seemed to be more empathetic or sympathetic to the democratic cause. But over time, in this period of time, especially since Biden's term in office, there was that constant realization that the black population, the Hispanic, were moving away from the Democrats, more towards the GOP, towards the orange man as they call him.
Who are you voting for?
President Trump.
Who are you voting for?
Trump.
Who are you voting for?
Trump.
Who are you voting for?
Trump.
I'm a Trump supporter, man.
And despite Donald Trump being an indicted president, criminally indicted, charged in a court of law, the American population have made a statement and said, this is the man we are putting in office. So that says something about the Biden administration. And certainly this is a burden that Kamala Harris had to carry.
I think we're off to a pretty good start.
Having President Biden come out so late in the race obviously did not work very well for Kamala Harris. And I think by far, some of the issues that Kamala Harris was executing, pretty much like the prosecutor that she was to the public, especially in issues of women's rights, issues of abortion, issues of sexuality. These are things that reign against the grain of the American conservative society. So the race is over. Donald Trump is in office. What is the lesson for Africa? What is the lesson for blacks in the diaspora? Obviously, there's a lot of statement about some of the things that Donald Trump stands for. In the last term, the most infamous statement was Donald Trump referring to African countries as shithole countries, essentially viewing Africa as a place that actually has potential, but is failing to step up to the plate to make good for itself and certainly for its children. Leadership in Africa has been the greatest failure. And much as Trump rubbed everyone, pretty much everyone, the wrong way by that statement, in a greater reflection, there is truth in the statement that Africa certainly is failing itself. Africa can do a lot for itself, but it's not. Instead, we have leaders who have been lining up to Washington from the days of Mobutu, of Zaire, of DRC Congo. And now you've got President Ruto of Kenya, who is working too closely with Washington, with an ambassador who has appeared to be more of Kenya's foreign affairs cabinet secretary, Ambassador Whitman. As we have always talked about as Africans, the minute you are working too closely or you are praised by the Western world, there is a greater interest that they are working towards. And that is the nature of nation states, that you look out for your own interests. That ideally is what African states should also be doing. The average African leader does not take care of the interests of their nations. They take care of their own interests. We call them tumbocrats, which essentially means tumbo, Swahili for stomach. That what they can swallow down the throat is far greater than what they can provide as a national interest for their country. That has been the greatest problem. So you would have Mobutu get his aid from the US, work closely with the American government, Reagan, for example, and the many presidents that passed through his hands as he was president of Congo. He's now the late. That seems to be a pattern that has been picked up by other younger leaders on the continent of Africa today, who look out for the interests of themselves and their cronies and fail to honor the interests of their nations. So they end up borrowing money that the countries never really get to spend to develop either the health sector, the education, or the infrastructure. But the nation's citizens have to pay back that money. Those are some of the challenges. They are hoodwinked into fighting proxy wars. African countries, and certainly Kenya is one of those countries, that have invited the US to have bases within the continent. And we've seen backlashes in certain countries. And certainly in Kenya, because of that engagement very close with the US, Kenya has suffered terror attacks. Way back in 1998, there was such a terror attack, a massive one. American citizens lost their lives. Kenyan citizens lost their lives. We've had many, many more through the years. That tells you that there is a disruptive nature in some of those engagements. Indeed, terrorism is a global problem. But how far, how deep should African nations be involved in that process, then inviting trouble back at home? Kenya, for example, is now in Haiti. And I think it's commendable that we are looking out for our brothers and sisters who are in Haiti. But the influence of the US in Haiti is more about creating a buffer to prevent the inflow of the Haitians into the US, but letting other nations such as Kenya, who have stuck out their necks to do their own dirty work. in Haiti. Will President Donald Trump continue with some of these policies, some of these bilateral engagements? A lot is likely to change. Donald Trump's thing is transactional. He's a businessman.
You're fired.
Who has made money off of business deals. His thing is, how can America gain, build its industry, and look out for itself? So if Africa cannot give, it's not free lunch. Donald Trump is not going to give. He's got 4 years. In those 4 years, Donald Trump is likely to ensure that some of his older policies are well screwed in, a lot more welcomer. And African presidents who have been doing their deals with Washington are now on notice. Why can't Africa take a bold step, police their own interests, build the continent, look out for their children within the continent and certainly in the diaspora? President Ruto is on record saying that Africans out there
Welcome back home.
have a birthright to visit and certainly do not need a visa. It was a hoax. At the end of the day, they were bamboozled into believing that this is a brother laying out the carpet for them to return home. That remains one of the biggest challenges that the black diaspora is facing, trying to come back to motherland, either to settle or to visit. Those are the realities, man. So if you're out there, please share your thoughts. What do you think the policies, the presidency of Donald Trump will portend for Africa, for blacks across the world? Even Kenyans who are out there, we have seen a Kenyan win in Minnesota.
I am super excited. Today is orientation day for new legislators.
So it means Africans are also making an impact, because indeed it is a global village. We have Americans here, we have Brits here, we've got other nationalities across the continent. So it's not just Africans who are trying to get onto those boats to go to Europe and try to make a better living. Indeed, there are Western nationals who are making far much bread here on the continent than they would make back at home. Those are the realities. We are living in a global village. What does the US portend for Africa? That is a question you need to answer. So please share your thoughts. So to that extent, Africa perhaps will be finding a president who has no room for free lunch. Certainly NATO is aware that Donald Trump had said we cannot keep bankrolling the NATO as if other members do not exist. It has got to be that we all carry the same burden. African heads of states need to carry their own local burden. Engineer their political and economic systems to work within what they can raise as capital within the nation states. But for some reason, there's an appetite for donor money. And the greatest donor money that has been received lately is Chinese money. Chinese dollars, Chinese yuan, building the Belt and Road Initiative, thousands of miles of roads, rail network, bridges, ports, and in the process, it is China's soft power coming into play, giving China the opportunity to harvest mineral material, to export their labor, their population to Africa, to get agricultural goods. There's even talk that they harvest soil. So where will Africa be in this new dispensation? We are certainly not in what you'd call a unipolar system with the US hegemony ruling the entire world. Certainly America is threatened. China has arrived. Russia is still here. They have never left. They may have lost a bit of that power, but they certainly remain a force to reckon with. They remain a threat. The Russian conflict with Ukraine remains a big problem. Trump has been considered as a more friendly president towards Putin. What will an America with Trump look like in terms of relations with President Putin? Do you think he's good for peace in the world? President Trump has managed to engage with North Korea. Never thought possible, never imagined by Americans as a possibility. So to a certain degree, you can say that he seems to be slightly better for global peace. But the issue of the Middle East remains a thorny issue. Share your thoughts, man. Africans in the diaspora, what are your thoughts on this matter? blacks out there, what are you feeling? There's a lot of feedback online and a lot of disappointment also within certain quarters that Trump made it back to office.
Promises made, promises kept. We're going to keep our promises.
For us, it is domestic affairs for Americans. We cannot relate with it in as far as the foreign policy touches on Africa. Beyond that, the domestic affairs we leave to our brothers and sisters who are out there to engage. So please do, but share your thoughts. And of course, if you're here for the first time, many thanks. If you're returning, again, many thanks. Like, subscribe. This is Afrocentric after all, proud and representing. All the way from Nairobi, many thanks. And we'll see you again in the next one. Bye-bye.